Wells. And before we do that, let me make sure that I'm recording this, because the last time I forgot to record it. All right. All right. So Dr. Wells is a subject matter expert in financial aid. Dr. Wells has spent over 18 years in higher ed administration work, working with students and parents to pay for college. Knowing that financial aid is a monetary lifeblood for college students, Dr. Wells remains well-versed on the Department of Education, state and institutional financial aid systems, so that she can continue to assist those that need help understanding how to pay for school. Dr. Wells will share a wide range of financial aid tips for students, parents, so that they will be fiscally responsible while pursuing an education. Information on repayment options after school ends will also be discussed today. Most importantly, she will share what is happening with school loans and grants in the midst of the pandemic. Dr. Wells is currently the CEO of Road to Redemption, a nonprofit organization that assists nonviolent ex-offenders with educational, employment, and housing resources. She's a wife of 23 years and mother of 2 preteen daughters. Let us welcome Dr. Wells to the webinar. Thank you for coming, Dr. Wells.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So you can take it from here.
All right. Well, first, I want to thank you, Dr. Moreno, for putting this series together. I think it's definitely something that's needed. Like we were discussing earlier, with us being in such close quarters, being confined, we're all looking for something outside of the home that we can do. And I think this is the next best thing. It's also educational. With you being an educator, I wouldn't expect anything less from you to put something like this together for all of us. So thank you for including me and being a part of it all. So what I want to do, I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to do it via PowerPoint. It's going to be a presentation driven call. So if you don't mind, my daughter taught me how to do this morning, so I'm praying I get it right. Let's see. How's that?
It's coming up.
All right. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll kind of hold the questions till the end, but I do want to put something out there just to gauge where everyone is as far as their understanding of financial aid. So what we're going to talk about today, just really a high level overview of financial aid for new and current students, or people that are in school right now, or you're going to be starting this fall. Financial aid options after you're done with school. For example, if you stop going, or if you you've graduated and now you're wondering what to do, what options do I have? And then specifically what's happening right now with school loans, with COVID-19, layoffs, uncertainty as far as financial aid and funding. What's going on right now, and what is the Department of Education doing for students? First question I'd like to present to the group, and just if you can throw it in there in the chat, what is financial aid? When you hear the term financial aid, what does that mean to you? What do you think that is? And while you're putting in there what you think it is, I'll tell you a small story, and I hope my husband doesn't mind us sharing the story, but when we first got married, we went to buy a car. And we picked the car we wanted, and we wanted to meet with the finance team and find out how much can we qualify for, what's our interest rate going to be. And when they ran our credit, they said, your interest rate will be a lot lower if you get a hold of those school loans. And the first thing my husband said was, well, I don't have school loans. I had financial aid. And so turns out he had school loans, not realizing that school loans was part of financial aid. So he really had no idea what financial aid was when he went to college. And so that started our learning process of financial aid. What I'll call it for the sake of this meeting, I'll call it FA. That's the term that's easier to say. Financial aid is a little long, so we'll just say FA for the duration of this presentation. So does anyone have an idea what financial aid is? Was there any chat in there? Let's see.
Let me unmute myself. Someone says financial support to assist with paying for schooling costs. And someone said money that is used to pay for school expenses, books, materials, gas. Oh, I like the gas part of it.
Yes. That's a financial aid advisor answer right there. That's exactly right. So for the sake of understanding, financial aid it's federal, it's state, it's school money that they offer, it's private resources, all to pay for school. And you're right, it covers everything from transportation, room and board, books, fees, tuition. It covers a wide range of things, but it does include loans, it is grants, it's scholarships, fellowships, tribal funds for Native American population. It's work study, veteran affairs, education, and cash, cold hard cash. Believe it or not, you can still use cash in this society. I know it's kind of hard right now. I went to the store the other day and they had a sign saying no cash, cards only. They wouldn't even take the cash from my hand. So, but cash is considered financial aid. Things to know up front when you're going into the financial aid office, you want to be armed with a little bit of information. I know it's a lot to navigate, but the more you know, the better prepared you'll be for how much you're taking out when you're going to school. The first thing you need to know is there's no such thing as free money for school. Dr. Marino and I used to hear students say that all the time. Oh, we want the free money, free money, free money. It sounds great when you hear about grants, but grants even still are not free. Free means there's no obligation. It's just given to you. You don't owe anything for it. But with grants, you have to understand that there are still some criteria that need to be met. And there are possibilities where you will have to repay it. So to think that you're going to get free money and there's nothing you have to do for it is a misnomer. And so that's the first thing you need to understand. There's going to be some obligation for any dollar that you receive in federal or state or institutional aid. Also know that financial aid is an investment. And so every dollar that you get, you need to account for it. Yes, you can use it to pay for gas. Yes, you can use it to pay your card payments, but there are limits to how much you can receive. So be mindful as you're applying for these funds and the funds are dispersed, where is that money going? Another thing that's important to know is that your FA will follow you to every school that you attend. So if something happens at one school, it doesn't work out and you may transfer to a different school, everything that happens at that school will be known by the next school. So make sure that you're leaving in good standing with your financial aid and that can be tracked. So students would come in without telling us what happened at the last school, get to our school, and we'd find out that they were either out of options for aid and it was almost difficult for them to finish their degree program. So financial aid does follow you. So keep that in mind as you're seeking out fund sources. And then you're responsible for every single dollar, whether it's a grant, a loan, a scholarship, a fellowship. And there's a database that houses all of that information, and that's called the National Student Loan Data System. And so I put the link there, so if you write that down, but you'll also get the PowerPoint. I believe, Dr. Marino, are you passing out the PowerPoint at the end as well? So
Yes,
it will have, okay, it'll have all of those links in it. But the National Student Loan Data System, NSLDS, is almost like a credit report. And it tells every fund that was dispersed, whether it was a grant or a loan, in your name under your social security number. So you should be aware of what's on there at every time. The first thing when you're applying for financial aid is you're going to do an application. The application is free. It's no obligation. It doesn't give you any obligation to the school that you're attending. You can put a list of schools. I believe you can do 10 schools at a time in this application, but it doesn't obligate you to any one school. And basically what that application, the FAFSA, if you've heard that term FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is all, once you put that information in, they'll be able to tell you then and there on the spot how much you're eligible for in federal aid, meaning money from the Department of Education, loans, grants, and other fund sources that they have available. That's the first step to finding out what you qualify for. After you complete that application, then you also need to ask the school, what other aid sources do you have and what do those applications look like, so that you also can apply for those as well at the time. It can be done on paper and it can also be done electronically. I recommend doing it electronically as often as you can. Some schools are still using the paper documents for those that aren't as computer savvy, but the school should be able to help you with that application online. It's a lot easier and it's a lot faster. I'm going to switch just a little bit. After that application, you have to determine your eligibility for aid. And so aid is available to US citizens and eligible non-citizens. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what's considered an eligible non-citizen. International student eligibility, if you're a US national, a US permanent resident, you're eligible for federal aid by the Department of Education. If you hold an I-94 or a T visa, you are eligible for federal aid. If you're under battered immigrant qualified alien, meaning you are a spouse or you are hosted by a citizen and they're abusive, you're eligible for federal aid under the battered immigrant qualified alien. Wow. Citizens of Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, the Republic of Palau are also considered eligible non-citizens, and all of those qualifications make you eligible for federal aid. Unfortunately, DACA is not eligible for federal aid. Deferred action childhood arrivals, they are not eligible for federal aid, but may be eligible for state aid. So you would have to work with your school to find out what that would look like. After you complete your FAFSA, they're going to give you an award letter. Now, your award letter is going to detail your package for financial aid, but it is going to be estimated. And so I want to make sure that people understand when they give you that award, it is estimated based on the information you put into the application at that time. An award letter sometimes will show if you have out-of-pocket costs. Sometimes it'll show where you have an overage, but it's definitely going to detail everything that you're eligible for, how they arrived at that amount, and what your remaining costs will be. Now, keep in mind, this is an estimate based on what you put in your application at that time, and it is possible that additional information will be needed. For those of you that have bought a home, you know, when you fill out the application and you get your pre-approval, then it goes to an underwriter, and then they may want additional information. The same thing happens with financial aid. The financial aid office will give you an estimated package, but then it may be up for further review, what's called verification, where you'll have to provide additional information that may change the amount of your award. So keep in mind, there's no guarantee, there's no promise, no implication. It's an estimate, and always keep that in mind, it's an estimate. An academic year is 8 months. So each year you're gonna have to do the process over again. So be proactive about it. Make sure that you understand when that year is up. Your award letter will tell you the dates of your award from what date to what date. It's usually going to be an 8-month period. So just always know that, again, I'm going to have to do this. If you're going to a 4-year university, you're going to do this 4 times. After you get your award letter, then you can decide if this is the right package. Will this package work for me? And then you'll do an entrance counseling, which will give you everything you ever wanted to know about financial aid and probably more. You won't remember most of it, but they'll give you copies of it. Make sure you go back and read that information again in detail so that you can ask questions. The next step would be a master promissory note. Once you sign that master promissory note, you're obligating yourself to loans at that institution. Now, if you're doing a financial aid package that does not include loans, you should not fill out a master promissory note. And you need to make sure that you do not fill one out if loans is not something you're willing to accept. And then the school's going to have you fill out their version of a finance agreement. Basically, you're going to declare, this is how I'm paying for school. This will be my primary option. And they're going to hold you to that option. So if you say cash is your option, then cash is going to be your primary resource. Anything that comes after that is considered secondary. So they're always going to go to you for your cash first and your other sources next. If you choose financial aid is your primary. Cash will always be your secondary option, whether you agree to it or not. Know that you are responsible. If financial aid never pays $1, if your scholarship doesn't come through, you're responsible to come up with a way to pay for that education. Loans, I know some people think that loans have a negative connotation because you don't want to be riddled with debt when you're done with school. But I also ask that you look at loans as a means to an end and an investment in yourself. The one thing no one can take away from you, they can repossess your car, they can foreclose on your home, but they cannot There's no possible way for them to take the knowledge that you have once you've gone to school. Once you've learned it, you know it. It's an intangible, but a very valuable asset. And so think of loans in that way, an investment in yourself. There are federal loans and there are private loans. Now, federal loans can range from loans with interest that accrues while you're in school that you don't pay. Unsubsidized loans are loans that interest accrues from the moment those funds are dispersed to your school. The interest rates currently, and I'll share with you, subsidized loan interest rates are just over 4%. Unsubsidized loans are also at 4% if you're an undergraduate student. As a graduate student, the interest rate goes up. It is, let's see, for graduate professionals, it's 6.08% for an unsubsidized loan. And what that means, unsubsidized, is you're paying interest from the time it's dispersed, you're accruing interest. You don't have to pay it until after you're finished with school, but it is accruing, and it accrues and it compounds daily. And so if you want further information on how that looks, I can share that with you offline, but know that every single day that money sits at your school, sits on your account, pays for your tuition on an unsubsidized loan, the interest is accruing. The Direct Plus loan is something that they came out with for graduates and professional students who, some students actually stop working so that they can do their internships, do their practicums. And so that's a way for them to be able to pay for their living expenses while in school, in addition to the unsubsidized loans paying for the tuition and fees. The interest rate on a Direct Plus loan right now is 7.08%. The difference in the plus loans, the subsidized and the unsubsidized loans, is a Direct Plus loan is not deferred while you're in school. It's due 60 days after the end of your academic year. So keep that in mind, that unless you request deferment, you're going to be paying those loans also while you're in school. Parent Plus loan is the same thing. For parents that have children that are in school that need additional funding, the Parent Plus loan and the Direct Plus loan are credit-based. So unlike the subsidized and unsubsidized that are just based on your eligibility criteria of being a US citizen, you haven't defaulted on a loan, you haven't had any drug felonies, that's one of the criteria. So if there are any drug felons out there that are questioning if you can get school loans, it's highly unlikely, not impossible, but highly unlikely. But the Direct Plus loan is credit-based, and it's not based on a credit score. It's based on how late you may be on specific things on your credit, but they are willing to work with you. So don't think of it as an end all if you don't have great credit. It's not based on a FICO score. So it is still possible to be able to borrow that, because ultimately it's for school. And then there's the consolidation. You can consolidate all of your loans together from all the schools that you went to and get those into one interest rate. The difference in your federal loans and your private loans, private organizations make those loans, Wells Fargo, Chase Bank. So your credit is factored in on those loans, and the terms and conditions are set by that lender. The interest rate vary based on your credit, and they are payable while you're in school. Unfortunately, in that case, there are no consolidations and there are no forgiveness programs with your private loans, but it is an option if you do need to pay for school to do private loans. In some cases, you may actually get a lower rate than the unsubsidized loans, depending on your credit. And keep in mind that a loan is any money that you borrow must pay back, and you will pay it back with interest. So the amount that you borrow is not the amount you're going to pay back. You're going to pay back more. Grants, which a lot of times people look at as free money, it is money that you do not have to repay. So the good thing about grants is there's no limit on to how many you can get. It's just if you represent an extreme financial need, and they'll determine that when you do your FAFSA application, they'll give you a number at the end. It's an EFC, an estimated family contribution. What that number is derived from is how many are in your household, how many in your household are in college, and what is your annual income, your taxable income. Right now, the Pell Grant for 2021 is $6,345 if you're fully full-time enrolled, and you can get that for 6 years. So again, you'll apply every year. And if you're not full-time, it is prorated. So they'll prorate it if you're half-time, if you're 3/4 time. And you can also get Pell Grant if you're enrolled less than half-time. It is subject to repayment, which then doesn't make it free if you withdraw early, if your enrollment status is reduced, if you receive other scholarships outside of the financial aid, they'll apply that money first, which will reduce the amount of Pell Grant you can receive. And if that happens, then you would have to pay back a portion of that Pell Grant if it was already used or sent to you for any reason. And if you do find yourself in a repayment situation, you have 45 days from the date the school notifies you. So typically the school will notify you. It's not something we expect that a student would know on their own. There's also the SEOG or SEOG, which is the Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. And that's totally based on how the campus wants to pay it out. It depends on what school you're going to. The last school I worked, they did it for anyone that had extreme financial need, meaning you could not pay anything out of pocket to go to school if you were asked, and they would apply it in $1,000 increments to each semester. And it is first come, first serve. So once the school runs out, because they get a certain allotment of the CEOG grant, once that money has been spent, it's done. So it's first come, first serve. Make sure you ask about all of those things. Do you have CEOG at your school? If so, what is the award for a full-time enrolled student? What is the award if I'm enrolled half-time? And have I been applied for it, and am I being considered? So make sure you're asking those questions. Go in armed with the information. I know about CEOG. Do you do it at your school? And then there's other aid sources, of course. There's your gifts. If your grandmother, your aunts, your cousins, your friends want to invest in your education and you're giving them a reason to want to invest, think of gift aid. Scholarships are usually given by foundations, organizations, various entities, and you'd be surprised how many scholarships are out there. I actually have a list of scholarship resources that I'm willing to send to anyone that may need it. They're usually based on need or merit. For example, I know I have a cousin who got one for being left-handed, and that was offered by Crayola. So, if you have single mothers, Betty Crocker used to offer one for anyone that was the child of a single parent. So if you can think of an organization, there's most likely a scholarship opportunity there. It's just, you have to do the due diligence to find out what those are. But please, please, please avoid scams of any kind. If they're asking for money, it's not legitimate. You don't pay money to get money for school. So keep that in mind. The application is free. Most applications are free. Your college application may cost, but scholarships should not have a fee to apply. A fellowship is a little bit different from a scholarship. A fellowship is a prize and an award. It's competitive, and they're usually for graduate students. They usually offer fellowships for graduate students, medical students, and students that have done their doctorate work and now doing postdoctoral fellowships, meaning working with organizations, doing research, almost like an internship, but they're paying you. They give you a cost of living stipend, and sometimes they just give you a check for the research. For example, there's a lot of educational research out there that you can do, and they'll pay you, $5,000 or $6,000 per journal write if you're writing journals, things like that. So those are mostly after you have to normally have a degree already, and they're looking for people that are going to pursue additional education. State grants here in the state of California, it's the Cal Grant, if anyone's heard of Cal Grant. Each state offers a grant. So you'll want to, depending on what school you're going to, where you're accepted, the first thing you want to ask is, what is the state grant for that state? And the link to find that out on your own is advisors.com, and it tells you every state from A to Z. So you want to go there and find out, what is the criteria? What do I need? Is it based on my financial need? Is it based on my high school test scores? Is it based on the field that I want to go into? Is it based on anything special about me? whether it's your ethnicity or your heritage. So you want to find out what those criteria are, and then make sure that you're filling out the applications to get that determination as early as you can. They all have different deadlines. I know here in California, the deadline was March 2nd. So each state, I'm sure, has one. If you're looking to go to summer school, you want to do those as soon as possible, and they usually pay in the fall. The main criteria is to complete a FAFSA. The FAFSA really starts all education financial source applications, so you want to do that one first, and then check in with the state for what additional applications and deadlines may be needed. And then federal work study. Federal work study is part-time work while you're going to school. For those that can do it, it's definitely a good way to make additional funding for your tuition and fees. You can be an undergraduate, you can be a graduate, you can also be a doctoral student, but I'll be honest, Dr. Marino and I had trouble with that when we tried it a couple of times because their financial aid package was already so full. It was hard to find financial need for the student worker. So unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't work. With community service, we work with people in the community that needed volunteers, and then we set up contracts with them to bring our students there as employees to get their hours, but then we were able to pay them through federal work study. So a lot of times the federal work study positions are community service based, or they're related to your field of study. So if you're working in psychology and you're doing your practicum hours, we can also have that set up for you to be paid through your financial aid. And each school may be different. A lot of jobs may be on campus. I think we staffed a lot of our departments with work study, and so it was kind of a win-win situation for the student as well as the organization. So a lot of organizations will accept federal work study. It is part of your financial aid package, so it can reduce the amount of aid you receive from other sources. So you really just want to kind of look and see if that's something that benefits you. Instead of taking out as much in loans, you'll do work study. If you're having to give up scholarships and grants, I would not recommend doing that. And then you have to meet enrollment guidelines. You have to be enrolled at least half time, and you have to be meeting academic standards for your university. So if you're on probation, then that does impact whether you're able to work as a student worker at your university.
Interesting.
For those that have already gone to school, maybe out of school, or approaching being out of school, you are going to go into repayment if you borrowed loans. If you had grants, scholarships, fellowships, then this doesn't necessarily apply to you, but student loan repayment does begin 6 months after your last day of school, whether you graduated or stopped going altogether. Sometimes you're enrolled full-time, you drop down to half-time. If you drop below half-time, you will go into your grace period. After that 6 months grace period, you will go into repayment. So I know sometimes financial advisors will tell you, oh, you don't have to pay those until 6 months after you graduate, and that's best case scenario, but you also will go into your grace period if you fall below half-time. So it's not just at graduation, it's also if you fall below half-time. As long as you're enrolled half-time, your loan should remain in a grace period. And they will automatically go into a standard repayment. And just to share with you what a standard repayment is a fixed payment amount, but they spread it over 10 years. So if you borrowed $50,000, they're going to take that $50,000 with all of the interest that you've been accruing, and they're going to divide that up into 120 payments. And that's going to be a standard repayment. You can ask for a different repayment option, but it's going to automatically go on to standard repayment. There's also graduated, extended, revised pay as you earn. There's about 8 different repayment options. You have to find the one that is best for you. And I'll show you what those look like in just a moment. You're responsible to choose that option. They're going to put you on standard repayment, but you, knowing what the different options are, choose the one that works best for you. Ideally, when you graduate, you're going to have your dream job. You're going to already have an offer before you graduate, so you'll know what you're making. Unfortunately, in some cases, you don't graduate and get right into the workforce. You go back home for a while. It just really depends. So you may or may not be able to comfortably fit a standard repayment into your budget. So knowing what options you have, and there are a lot of options. So don't be discouraged in any way about that, on how you can get that paid back and in a comfortable payment that works for you. Standard repayment, as I said, gives you 10 years. A graduated repayment, they start low for a certain period of time, and then every 2 years, they're gonna incrementally increase, so that you can pay it off by the 10th year. So it's still a 10-year plan, it's just you pay a little bit less in the beginning, and then they incrementally increase over time. Extended repayment gives you 25 years to pay. Keep in mind, you take 25 years, you're paying a lot of interest on those payments over the next 25 years. There's something called a revised pay-as-you-earn, and then there was a pay-as-you-earn. Both of those are 20-year payment plans, but the way this one works, they look at your discretionary income and they figure 10% of your income. So after you pay your mortgage and your utilities, what do you have left? They're going to take 10% of that and make a payment for you. You have to have that one paid off in 20 years. Again, the longer you take, the more interest you're paying. Then they have income based. What is your income when you graduate? How much am I making, and what's feasible to pay while I'm working? That one is between 10 and 15% of your discretionary income. And that one gives you 25 years. What's not paid after 25 years is forgiven. So it sounds good that you get to pick a payment that fits your income, but know that you're taking 25 years of the next, you graduate at 25, for example. By the time you're 50, you'll have them paid off. Seems a long ways away, but trust me, it creeps up on you pretty fast. Income contingent is 20% of your income. And then the income sensitive is just based on your annual income. You get 15 years, and then they forgive the rest. So go into your repayment knowing what these are, and then pick the payment that works best for you.
Sounds good.
What if I can't pay? And there have been times where you know what, I can't pay. I got my mortgage, I got my car, I have children now. Things have happened. I need to reorganize some things. But the first thing you need to know is call the lender. Call the lender, no matter what the issue is. Avoiding the lender makes it worse. Calling them, it gives you almost a sense of peace to know that they just want to have you set up on a plan. The first thing you want to do is call and say, hey, you know what, I was on standard repayment. I think I want to look at income sensitive. They'll walk you through that. They'll have you do the applications. You'll probably have to provide tax information, but they will change that plan for you. If that doesn't seem to give you the payment you want, ask about deferring. I need to know, what are my deferment options? For deferments, a deferment is a temporary postponement of your payment, and it postpones the interest as well. So if you're in a deferment, the interest isn't accruing and the payments are postponed. You can do those in increments, monthly increments. And then if that doesn't work and that's not going to give you the payment, or you don't qualify, then you can always do what's called a forbearance. A forbearance can be done up to 12 months. And a forbearance is a temporary suspension or a reduction. If your payment is $150 and you can pay $50, they will in most cases accept that. Unfortunately, the interest does keep accruing while you're in a forbearance period, but you don't have to use the whole 12 months. I just need 90 days to kind of catch my breath. Can I do a forbearance? And they have different options for forbearance. They have general, mandatory, administrative, and then there's also one for teachers. So any teachers out there, anyone that's going to school, educators, teachers do have a lot of grace when it comes to student loans. And there's also the forgiveness program that if you work in a, is it a low income school, Dr. Marino, I believe, a low income school, or a school that in a impoverished area schools, they will do a forgiveness program with you. A portion of your loans will be forgiven after so many years in service to that school district. So keep all of those things in mind when you're deciding what you're going to do for your education. If none of these work and you happen to go into default, default means you went 270 days without making a payment. It happens, but it's not the end of the world. It's not permanent. It is reported to all credit bureaus. It does show on your NSLDS. So if you try to go anywhere else, that's the first thing. It's right at the top of the screen. It's a big red, almost like an exclamation point. So anyone can see that when you're looking at getting aid. It is detrimental to your credit, but again, it's something that can be overcome. Your entire loan balance, unfortunately, becomes due and payable immediately. So while you were on a standard repayment plan, you were paying, $100 a month, you now owe $47,000 in full. So you want to avoid default at all costs. To get the money back, they will offset your taxes. Every refund that you think you're getting, they'll take it before you even get a chance to see it. They will reach out to your employer and get it out of your paycheck. They will put liens on your property. All of your school records will be on hold. Any school you go to get your transcripts, to get jobs, or pursue education in a different way. And they can also pursue legal action. So you really want to avoid it at all costs. When there's forbearance and deferment and repayment options that you can change to, you want to exhaust all of those options first. And you definitely need to call. 270 days is a long time. So either you're ignoring it or you're afraid. Don't ignore, don't be afraid. They will work with you. And I want everyone to know that.
Absolutely.
Let's see. And also, one thing I didn't put in here, I want to talk really quick for those that went to a school that is no longer open, or the school closed while you're in school. There are also ways to have those loans discharged. If you become disabled at any point, you can work with your doctor to have those loans discharged. Just know that if you have them discharged, and when I say discharge, meaning they go away completely, or they can give you a portion of that discharge. They'll say, well, we'll discharge what you got in your bachelor's program, but you still owe what you got in your master's or your doctorate. If you were to pursue education again and do financial aid again, they would then reassume that debt back to your credit. So you would owe it all back over again. I did have a student once in my 18 years that had a full loan discharge because they were diagnosed terminal. And they ended up going into remission and decided, I'm going to go back to school and do something different. Well, that $30,000 that they thought had gone away came right back. So they started off $35,000 in the hole, but they were okay with that. They had a new outlook on life and they were fine with that. But just know that that does reassume if you do go back and pursue financial aid again. If you went to a school that closed, there's something called a borrower's defense to repayment. You can fill out that application and ask to have those loans discharged. The only thing is you cannot use that knowledge. So those transcripts will no longer be valid. If you go to a school and decide, okay, I'm going to finish that degree, you cannot pursue that same field. So if you were getting a degree in psychology, you can no longer get a degree in psychology. You would have to switch to business or anthropology or whatever it would be. You wouldn't be able to use the knowledge that came with that school. So something you have to balance and think about. What would I like everyone to take away from this? Use your National Student Loan Data System report to stay on top of your financial aid. Everything that you ever borrowed or received in grants on a federal level will be listed on there. The lender's information, the donor information will all be on there. The date that the funds went to the school will be on there. The address, the phone numbers, all of that information is there. Look at it periodically. I'll send you information if you need on how to access that. Because it is your responsibility to know what you received, know where it came from, know where it went. A lot of times students know they got a grant, but how was that money applied? How did the school apply that money? You really don't know until you look at that. So you need to be responsible. Go to the financial aid office. Be proactive. Don't wait for them to call you. You just periodically check in. Hey, I know that my school has received some money recently. Can you show me where that money went?
Tanesha,
Your
what is
finan- Go ahead.
oh, sorry. What is the website you just talked about, where they can see the list of everything,
Yes,
of all
it's
the loans
NS.
they've ever?
Yeah, let me go back for you. It's NSLDS, so National Student Loan Data System. I'll go back because it's actually, I listed it on here a few slides back. nslds.ed.gov. And when you go into that website, you're going to want to have what's called an FSA ID number. When you do your FAFSA or any financial aid application, you're going to have a number assigned to you that is tied to your social security number. You'll use that and then your date of birth to access your NSLDS. And again, it'll give you everything from your first day, your first disbursement, your Pell Grant, what your limit is, where you've reached, what status it's in. It'll tell you what repayment status you're in, what you're listed in, and when your payments are due, it'll tell you what your enrollment status is, what the school is reporting. The school reports to there. So every school is responsible to report to NSLDS within 30 days of any activity on your school account. Make sure, parents and students, that you file taxes on time every year, because that is what determines eligibility, whether it's grants or loans. And ask your tax preparer to give you what's called a FAFSA report. The FAFSA report basically has everything that's on a FAFSA taken from your taxes. So it makes it a lot easier to do your applications when you go to those schools, when you have a FAFSA report. And the best way to get it is when you do your taxes, have your tax person get one of those for you. It doesn't take any extra time, and it doesn't cost any extra. And again, I implore you, be proactive. On my pyramid here, you can see that data gives you information, information gives you knowledge, and knowledge gives you wisdom. So to go through school, to matriculate through an entire degree and not know how it got paid for, and where that money went, and what you're responsible for, would be irresponsible. So Dr. Marino and I, she used to say, have a paradigm shift. She used to drill that in our heads all the time. And it's the same thing. When you're in school, you're getting education in every department you go to. When you deal with the advisors, educate yourself. When you're dealing with financial aid, educate yourself. When you're in the class, educate yourself. So make sure that you know what's happening with your student account at all times. COVID-19. Yes, go ahead.
You have just a few more minutes. We have 15 minutes left, so maybe you want to get a few minutes to wrap up before we do questions and answer.
Okay, this I think is my last or second to last slide. So really quickly then, I'll go through COVID-19 and financial aid. Right now, all aid has been placed on administrative forbearance automatically. So you didn't have to do anything for that, but make sure that it is done by reaching out to your lender if you have loans already. Your payments will resume September 30th. Excuse me, but any payments, if you do make payments right now, they'll go to the balance. So keep that in mind, that you won't have any interest. Excuse me one second. Can you turn the heat off? Turn the heat off. Sorry about that. There's no penalties to pay right now. But if you are making automatic payments, those have been suspended as well. And if unfortunately you've had garnishments, offsets, all of those are going to be refunded. So if you haven't received your refunds, contact your lenders, contact your bank, and find out when that can take place.
Wait, did you say garnish anything? Say that again, please. We couldn't
Sure.
really hear you. Do you want to take
I'm
a
sorry.
minute? Do you want to take
Sorry
a
about
minute? Do you want to take a minute?
Oh no, I'm good.
Okay.
My heat is on and it's like drying my throat out. But
Okay.
basically, for people that have been in default or for whatever reason had to have a garnishment, or your taxes were offset, or If you are making automatic payments, anything after March 13th that was applied to your account, Department of Education has had it refunded to the student. So just make sure that if you were making payments on loans, on auto pay, check with your bank, because those payments, anything after March 13th, was most likely refunded back to your bank account. So you want to check and see if that's done. If you were on some type of a repayment plan, or if you had garnishments or taxes, like say they held your taxes, for those that may have filed taxes earlier in the year and they held part of your taxes because you owed on previous loans, they're obligated to send that back to you right now. And that was according to Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, that they were refunding all of those payments to anyone that may have made a payment. As of March 13th, they've automatically postponed everything. There's no interest and no payments due between March 13th and September 30th.
Is that for all loans or just the federal loans?
All federal loans. Now, if you have a private loan, I did actually go online and do some research. Even private lenders are willing to do the same thing. But I think in that case, they're not automatically doing it, but they will do it if you ask. So right now, it looks like for a period of March, for about 6 months, there's kind of no payments due on any student loans. They understand that there's more pressing things that people are needing to take care of. And so there's no credit reporting, there's no interest and no payments between March 13th and September 30th. If you're a student worker and your school is closed for physical location and only doing online, they are still obligated to assist you as a student worker with some sort of assignment so that you can continue to get your payments as a student worker. So if you're a student worker, make sure your school has made some allowance for you. There's a lot of virtual assignments that can be assigned, and I think the Department of Education is also enforcing that as well. Unfortunately, student work is not considered employment for the sake of unemployment insurance. So you would not be able to get unemployment, but your school, yeah, I know, but your school is obligated to give you work during this time. And if they don't have any available, to continue paying you. And private student loans are still due and payable, but they are offering COVID-19 allowances. You just need to call on a case-by-case basis and find out what those are. A link to all the resources, which will be in the PowerPoint that Dr. Marino will send out to everybody. And then lastly, what I can do to help if anyone does have questions or has a kid going to school or needs assistance of their own, I can give you guidance on how to complete your FAFSA. Again, never pay anyone to do a FAFSA. The FAFSA is free, but I can give guidance on that and would be happy to do so. Researching scholarships, I would be willing to help with that. I can also help with essay writing for college and scholarship applications. And of course, host financial aid workshops on anything specific that you would need if your organizations would like to have someone come out. All right, so are there any questions, anything that anybody?
We have a first question from YouTube. It was, first of all, thank you for that. That was so amazing. This is just wonderful information. And I know Dr. Wells, you know, I tell you, you should be doing this all day long, right? But because she knows all the stuff, like if you ask her questions, she can give you exactly where to get it. Now, she says, why does the interest go up when you're in graduate school?
Why does it go up? Well, probably your increase of knowledge. They assume you're making more money. I don't know the answer. I can only assume why, but undergraduates, and the way they looked at it, they also did loan limits lower when you're undergraduate versus graduate. And they look at the level of responsibility. For example, if you're 18 to 21, you get out at 21 years old, most jobs are going to be entry level. So when you're repaying those loans, you're only going to be able to pay back a certain amount and a certain amount of interest. I mean, I'm glad the government has a little bit of heart there to think, you know, age-wise, but the older you get, the more wiser you get, the more responsible you are. So Why not charge more interest? Do I agree with it? Probably, no, absolutely not, but
Mm,
that's just how it is, unfortunately.
okay. Any other questions? Do I see any other questions there somewhere?
Let's see.
Let's go about other aids. Oh, I have a question about oh, what is it? Appeal. So, I found out that, what you get from your FAFSA comes back and they give you all of these things that for your child.
Mhm.
I just realized that with my daughter going, with Abriana, oh, sorry, I called your name, Abby, sorry, that I could actually appeal, the FAFSA
Yes,
based on my circumstances.
yes, you
I
can.
didn't know that we could do that.
Yes, it's called a professional judgment review. And I've actually sat on professional judgment reviews. What the part that I guess never really made sense, even in 20 years of doing financial aid, is they always use your tax information from 2 years ago.
Yes.
So for a student that's applying for fall for financial aid for
Yeah.
2021, they're using the 2018 tax information. Now, my personal circumstances in 2018 were very different than my circumstances now. So if my daughter was to enroll in college now, what they're looking at is not representative of my circumstances today. So you then ask for an appeal, and there's probably 10 different conditions for appeal, but change in income is the first one on the list. Change in circumstances. In 2018, I lived with my parents. In 2020, I no longer live at home. I'm on my own. I have my own apartment. You ask for a professional judgment appeal, and basically it's a committee of financial aid advisors that sit back and read it and look at the circumstances. They may ask for additional information, and then they will override the standard and then offer you a financial aid package based on your circumstances. So absolutely, nothing is etched in stone. Appeal anything that you feel you want them to look at, especially if your financial circumstances have changed.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's another question. Does your loan amount listed on the website include interest?
It does include interest, and it is broken out to let you know how much of it is interest. So one thing with your subsidized loan while you're in school, if you're making payments on that amount, you're only paying the loan itself. Subsidized loans don't have interest accruing while you're in school. So if you're ever looking at those reports and you're thinking, where should I attack first? What's the best way to make these payments? You can also specifically ask to make interest only payments. When you go into repayment, there's that option as well. I say always tackle your subsidized loans first, because those are the ones that have interest that only accrued after you got out of school. It didn't accrue while you were in. Unsubsidized loans are the ones that had interest from day one. So the moment that you get that letter saying, okay, we're sending $5,000 to the school, you already know 5,000 and start calculating that interest in your head. Subsidized loans, if you're looking at the best way to pay down, start with your subsidized, because they have the lower interest than the unsub.
Okay, so thank you. You have another one here. It says, wait. Does the NSLDS website also list private loans?
They do not. They do not list the private loans. They only list federal. But for private loans, you would then go to your credit report and find those, because those are definitely reporting on your credit report. And then you want to follow up with the institution. If for whatever reason that school is closed, because I know some schools had private loans that they housed that they've now sold to other people, and it's probably hard to figure out where to go. You can always call Department of Education and ask them what they have on record for you, because the school will have had to report to them also what they're charging you and when that dispersed. So if you don't find it on your credit report, you'll contact Department of Education. And if you want to send me something specifically to my email, I can actually give you the information to the Department of Education Ombudsman. They're like a liaison between student and Department of Education, and they can help navigate that for you.
Do you have your email on the PowerPoint?
I do, the FADoctor@gmail.com.
Oh, okay. What is it again? The FA
The-
doctor.
The FA Doctor, THEFADOCTOR @gmail.com.
Oh my gosh. Okay. THEFA DOC.
TOR.
Oh, okay, doctor. Okay. At
Gmail.
all right. All right. That's a good title right there, Dr. Wells. All right. Now there's a long post here.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, hold on.
Oh, I see a good one from Georgina.
I have an
unsubsidized
unsubsidized student loan from a school that closed. I did finish and receive a degree, but the school is no longer open and not accredited. Now I have a loan that haunts me. Where does she start?
She starts with a borrower's defense to repayment. So basically, I can't use the degree. I can't use what I got from the school. And I'm sure when you went to that school, they told you all the things you'd be able to do with it. You want to do what's called, there's two, there's a closed school discharge, or there's something called borrower's defense to repayment, meaning I don't feel I should have to pay this, and here's why. And what that'll do is that'll take that loan and it'll put it in a forbearance period for 24 months while they work with you to figure out what happened and whether it's going to be discharged or not. So at best, you'll get 2 years where you don't have to pay for this. I mean, at the minimum, at best, you can have that discharge. So I would start with borrower's defense. And if after 2 years that doesn't, then we'll do the closed school discharge and have it go away completely. Because again, if you're not able to use the degree and you have no way to go back, you probably can't even get transcripts from this place, then you do have a defense on why I should not pay this back. So there's two options there. So if you want, I can send that to Dr. Marino to send to you or send it to you. You just let me know if you want to reach out.
Yeah,
I'll show you how to
you
do
can
that.
send it to her directly.
Okay.
That works. Thank you. I don't see any other questions, but I do know that you have given us a lot of information today that, we are so grateful. I want everyone to turn on, you can unmute yourselves. You can unmute yourself so you can let Dr. Wells know, how she has contributed to your lives today. And so unmute yourselves, please, and let's say thank you.